Let's do it. Okay, we're recording. Boom. This is my non-dual gift. Nothing. Okay, we are here today, Dream Talkers, with Patrick. Want to share your last name?
Yeah, it's Messel.
Messel, okay. And this is a special treat because most of my guests are perfect timing. That's good background music.
Wait,
come back. This is a special treat because I don't really know you that much.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit last week, and so we're going to get to know you along with my listeners.
Yeah, I think you proposed the podcast to me, and you were like, yeah, if you don't mind coming and speaking on it, that'd be cool. And I was like, are we talking about the nature of reality? And you were like, yes. And I was like, I'm in. That's like the only thing I really like to do.
I remember that exact thing I was thinking about on the way over. That I'm that dude that I was always the guy talking to my friends for like, bro, why do you care about that stuff? I'm like, how can you not? Like,
I literally can't help it.
I can't either.
People want to talk about normal things
to
talk about.
Talk.
And there's no blame on them for wanting to talk about sports and movies and whatever. But I'm like distracted the entire time because I'm like,
because we're like missing the biggest piece.
What's happening right here?
That's it, man. That's it. Cool. So this is gonna be fun.
Yeah.
So, let's start at the beginning.
All right.
Do you want to retell your story of? And I remember you said it just came to you last week, which is very interesting.
I remembered.
Yeah.
Which is an uncommon thing.
What sort of brought you in this general direction that eventually brought you to one of Paul's meetings?
Yeah. So I am not all that special in my background. I come from the suburbs in Kansas City, raised in a Catholic family. I found as I've gotten older that that's not too uncommon either amongst people looking for truth.
I think it's probably more than non. Like, I think most people grew up with some sort of traditional fundamentalist something and rebelled against it, and then did the double back and
exactly.
Yeah.
So that's exactly what I did, and
right
and as soon as I was an age to apply any critical thinking at all, I think I got myself out of that. And I was going to Catholic school, and I, threw a fit and told my parents I didn't want to go anymore in fifth grade. And then for years thereafter, really just doubled down on, this is more clear in retrospect, and it's the reason for what you say that this might be common experience for people, but realizing that the truth that was laid out so explicitly in front of you, saying this is the way it is, and you're like, turns out no, turns out probably not, that can put something in you, or put something in me, of well, then what is going on? And the fact that you're able to think yourself out of that thing feels like getting closer to truth. So I think that has left me probably with a lifelong desire to continue getting closer to truth, even if I can never fully get there. So for a while I embraced kind of your radical atheism, Richard Dawkins type stuff.
Were you into Sam Harris at all?
I never was.
Okay.
I never was. Okay. By the time I heard about him, I was already a philosophy major, and he doesn't have a great rep amongst the philosophy major. I can't say myself that I have a negative opinion. That's kind of a adopted view.
But you it was based on your area of study. You were just like, okay, no, he's the outcast, or
I guess. I don't have a good reason for it, but same deal.
Okay.
I mean, I felt very strongly. It was definitely reactionary to where I was coming from. Like, everyone's walking around deluding themselves, believing in this man in the sky who's going to make their life good, and then even more insidiously believing in an afterlife, and not understanding that, as soon as you get out of that normal mindset, the first big conclusion that's going to change the way you feel about the world is the fact that when you die, you die. And that's a very fundamental thing for how you're going to approach life. And if when you die, you die. If that's the end of the
lights out,
the end of the line, then the point of life I mean, you could different people might have different views on it, but to me, the point of life seemed to be to get as much as I could in a very short time. It lit a fire within me of like, do everything you can, enjoy everything you can, because it'll all be wiped away at the end.
Yeah. Right on. Have you ever heard? This is kind of an obscure dude, but Duncan Trussell.
Don't think so.
He's been on Joe Rogan's podcast a bunch. He's a comedian that's also super into Eastern philosophy and stuff. And his metaphor is, if you were given a spacesuit and 80 years to like go explore some planet, you would try everything that you could in the spacesuit, right? You would feel everything, you would taste everything, you would get as much experience as you possibly could, because you only got 80 years.
Right.
And then the punchline is, that's what we're in this spacesuit. We call it a body, and we got it's got an expiration date. And another thing that came in for me when you were saying that was Ram Dass.
Yes,
he passed away recently. He was a big dude for me. He used to say, if a asteroid's about to hit the planet and you got 20 minutes to live, what do you do? And most people, you call all the people that you love and the stuff you've been putting off, that person you didn't want to make amends with, you make amends with, and you do all this stuff, right? And then the punchline there is an asteroid coming for your world. Like, we don't know when it's going to be.
And the difference between 20 minutes and 80 years to you, or now 60 years, or even less, you don't know. It could be 20 minutes.
Yeah, or it could be 2 seconds and the bus hits you, right? So why aren't we living that way already?
Exactly.
And that you don't need any sort of spirituality. All you need is, and that is what came in for me too, was like that unavoidable thing of death. It's going to end. So value what we have here today.
Right.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, and that's very much been my mindset since I was a kid. It's led to most of the choices that I've made, along with the search for truth, which continuing on, led me to, I got to college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I saw a class in the register that was, I think it was called Meaning and Truth and Reality and Meaning and Introduction, or something like a really high-minded, ridiculous class title.
Yeah.
And I was like looking at all these other classes that could not be more boring.
Nothing
organic biology and whatever. I'm like, meaning and reality. All right, let's do that. And I didn't even know at that point that this was going to be such a heavy track for me. But that seemed to fit. I definitely wanted to absorb all the info, all the deeper truths, whatever I could, and get myself closer. So became a philosophy major. Later on, as a part of that, I studied religion and Eastern religion. Had some really amazing teachers at State University in Colorado.
And this is like what do you call it, upper class, or this is like junior senior year, like not prereqs?
Actually there were some really good ones freshman year.
Was there? Okay,
where they're really trying to grab you and be like, here's why you should study philosophy, because it's a hard sell at a state school.
Yeah. Well, it's a hard sell anywhere.
It's a hard sell. What are you going to do with it? But definitely the even better ones later on, and to some extent that's due to the fact that I then added on a major in religious studies, which heavily overlapped with philosophy. It was also easy to add on. So.
Exactly. Yeah.
And those were, completely my favorite classes in college. Was Eastern religion. It was just, I love having the feeling of having my mind blown, and you learn about Buddhism the first time, you learn about Taoism the first time, you learn about ancient Hinduism. Around that same time, the story I told you that I had forgotten about, I hadn't even gone to college yet.
Okay.
And I was out being a hooligan at probably 17 or 18, late at night, like 1 a.m. We go to the gas station in the suburbs, now in Colorado. Nothing else is open. And there's a guy working there, and I don't remember the interaction that well, but somehow he says something about God, and we say something snarky back, and we said, do you really believe in that or whatever? And he says, I'm Muslim. And so he's not being standoffish,
Mhm.
and so it turns into a conversation, and we're really grilling him, trying to prove how smart we are,
Yeah.
and trying to win this argument about whether God exists or not, as if you can ever win that argument.
When you're a kid, you're convinced you got to figure it out, though.
Right.
Yeah, for
right.
sure.
I very rarely feel like I've convinced anybody, and maybe the one or two times where you were the element that helped him get out, it's not a good feeling.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't want to be that person.
It's really not.
Let him figure it out.
Exactly.
For
it's kind of an icky feeling. It's more like speak your truth and let them come to what they come to.
Well, because once you lose that foundation of what is the nature of reality, and everything else is built on top of that.
Yep.
That is derived from it. So if you pull that out from somebody, that's destructive. It can lead to all sorts of bad outcomes. Anyway.
No, it's a dangerous thing to do. 100%. Yeah, when you're.
But at the time, I loved doing it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
I just really wanted to convince people why I was right and they were wrong, and so the guy is very generous with us.
We're just getting him left and right today.
Tells us that he's telling us about his beliefs, and he's like, well, I don't know, different people believe different things, but here's what Allah is to me. And he describes something different than whatever caricature I had in my mind of.
He didn't go straight to your base cartoon character version.
Right.
Something a little bit deeper, and you were like, wait a minute.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
We weren't prepared for it.
He didn't go to the cartoon character at all. He talked about this idea of God is not out there. God is the seed of being, and is therefore being itself. Being manifests from that seed, grows from that seed, but that he's the source. And this is not the same as the philosophy that we necessarily talk about. Whatever. But for me, that was.
It hit.
It was a hard thing to argue against, and it got me on a track where I started thinking about being itself.
Yes.
Or being qua being, as we might say in a philosophy class. Existence, isness is one of my favorite
I love it.
ways.
Do you know Muji? He says isness a lot.
Really?
He's in the line of Ramana Maharshi. Do you know Ramana Maharshi?
I don't.
Oh, bro, I gotta introduce you to Ramana Maharshi.
You have all
he's
sorts of
the godfather of Non-Duality, basically.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you can go back to some of the Chinese Zen guys back in the day, but Ramana he's my dude.
I might know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
I'm not.
I call him, when I'm feeling particularly hippie, I call him my disembodied guru.
This is a long time ago.
This is
in
like
India?
1920s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I'm gonna share some books with you, man. You're gonna love them. Yeah.
And he's not the guy who founded Advaita Vedanta, right?
No, he didn't found anything. He was. I'll very briefly tell the story. I think I've told in the podcast before. He was a teenager. I'm gonna butcher this. Don't send the emails. He was a teenager. He was convinced he was gonna die. For some reason, he was sick or whatever, and just existential dread came across him. He was absolutely sure he was gonna die. He went through the whatever it is, 5 stages of dying, and bargaining and yada yada yada, and then came to acceptance. All within the matter of a night, and went to his bed, and he laid down, and he goes, okay, I accept that I'm going to die, but let me just go and find what it is that's going to die. Right? I know I'm going to die, but let me find where I am. And
what is the process that's going to end here?
Right? And he couldn't find anything.
Right.
And then
surprise
enlightenment, whatever word you want to put on it. And then I think I'm gonna get this wrong again, but I'm gonna just throw it out there. I want to say he didn't talk for 10, maybe 15 years after that.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and he was found meditating somewhere with bugs were eating his flesh. He was on his way out, and then some people they saw that he was on. I kind of think of back the stories of the Buddha, when people saw the Buddha right after that they were like, oh shit, that's not a man, it's a god. And he goes, I'm not a god, or whatever, right? So they could tell something was going on with him, and he explains that it's just, waves of euphoria and yada yada whatever, just total disappearance of any sense of self, disappearance of any sense of ego, and so people took care of him basically. He was just sitting there being whatever.
Sounds like he did die in a way.
In a way, yes, exactly.
But he was still around to talk about it.
And then I think after maybe 10 years or so, he finally was like, people kept asking questions. He's like, all right, damn it, you're gonna make me talk. Like, and then he started talking, and a lot of his pointing is very Paul. It's in the theme of Paul. It's a lot of stuff of like, well, the truth is in the silence. So as soon as I go to talk, I'm already obscuring the truth.
Right.
But I'll give it a shot. Like that kind of, very super clean, super like no extra any bullshit.
Right.
It's like, no, you are the truth. No, you are the truth. No, you are it. In any sort of, like, he very relentless in not allowing with any extra little mind candy.
That.
Yeah, exactly. So I got to share some Ramana stuff with you.
I would love that.
Yeah.
I can't believe
So
I'm not
Paul.
aware.
So one of the things that was a big trigger for me was Paul loves this one quote from Ramana. And I'm probably gonna mess it up. Maybe not. I've only heard it 1,000 times. A presupposing of a non-existent thing, wanting to get salvation for the non-existent thing. So, yeah. So that one, and it's one of those things, the first time I heard it, something happened, and then the 50th time I heard it, it was like, oh no, I thought I got it, but I didn't get it. And
like
not,
Paul said, that thing isn't ever going to get
exactly.
it.
Exactly. Nick's never going to get it. Patrick's never going to get it.
Nick can stop trying to get it.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to go over the head, but it's a good toss.
Right.
So the presupposing. So Paul always emphasizes the pre. So we suppose a self before the enslavement, before the claiming, before the attachment, before the grabbing. We presuppose a non-existent thing.
Right.
There is no self.
Yeah.
Right. It's a non-existent thing that we presuppose, and then it wants to get salvation, which makes sense, but it wants to get it for a non-existing thing.
Right.
The self wants to get salvation for the self, and then the next part of Ramana's little quote is, you can try to do that for eons and nothing's going to happen, basically.
Right.
Like you're pointed in the wrong direction.
Right.
See that the self was manufactured as an idea and then in your imagination put as before.
Yeah.
Right. It's a little. Someone needs to make like an animation of it to really get it across, because
it makes perfect sense to me, as much as it could make sense.
Well, you got a hell of a background too. So.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Well, that's part of what I wanted to talk about, because this is interesting to me.
Right on.
To finish up the background part, because it's not all that interesting, but I kept thinking about existence, and at some point along the way in my studies, I think the most pure form of it that I was introduced to was Upanishadic Hinduism, which people might call Advaita Vedanta today.
Yes, I'm very interested, because I've heard the Upanishads left and right. I've heard from Alan Watts. I don't know what it is.
Oh, you just gotta, you should just
in.
read it. I have like 6 translations. I'll give you one.
Cool. Okay. Let's get a scholar level, like, little quick breakdown, as much as you want to share.
Yeah,
I'm interested.
Well, and I want to, at some point, I hope we can get to talk about the differences in approach here.
Right
but to give you and if your listeners tend to write angry emails, they might correct me on every piece of this. But my takeaway, and again, like 12 years ago, reading the Upanishads and studying Advaita Vedanta, and then later, I should say, recognizing that, in my view, the Taoists were talking about the exact same thing. Not like they were in the same vicinity. It's the same thing. A different approach, different words,
different techniques,
language,
pointing to the same moon. Different fingers pointing at the same moon.
Exactly. And same thing. And by the way, you probably know this one, but Aldous Huxley, Perennial Philosophy.
Yeah.
He wrote a whole book on it, which I read the book. I think he gets kind of lost in the academia in parts, but he wrote a really short intro to the Bhagavad Gita that is a great, again, academic. I don't know if it's going to get you anywhere.
Yeah.
But as far as the idea goes, he's making the argument that this idea is not new. It's not unique, and it is incredibly similar. It pops up in literally every religion that we know about, and it looks the same every time. Different words, same idea, same negative theology, not that, same unity of existence, same role of subjectivity within that. Yeah, but Advaita was the one I started with, and that one, I mean, what's to say? They're going to use different words, but the basic idea is one that you'll recognize, which is everything is Brahman.
Which is God or the universe.
Yes, and if you want to get into academic specificness, there's Nirguna Brahman and Saguna Brahman. Nirguna Brahman is Brahman without attributes, the zero, the non-being in
emptiness,
in
maybe.
Taoism,
Yeah, okay.
emptiness in Buddhism.
Yeah.
I'm taking great liberties here, but to me, the unmanifest source of existence, and then in Upanishadic Hinduism, Saguna Brahman is the manifest, still all-encompassing source of existence.
Yes.
So like non-being, being, and then to borrow from Taoism, the 10,000 things coming out of being and non-being, and then awareness.
The mind creates the categories, but it's all one thing.
Right.
We divide, we segregate, but it's all one thing.
Right.
Yes.
But the source must be beyond that, right? That's like a key thing.
A little hint.
So the only other teaching besides everything is Brahman that is really important in Upanishadic Hinduism is at your core, what you really are when you strip everything away is Atman.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes translated as soul, which is a bad idea for all sorts of reasons.
With our baggage with that word.
Right.
Yeah.
But the last teaching is Atman is Brahman. And they will literally use Brahman and Atman interchangeably in places. They never talk about you necessarily being Brahman, but they will talk about everything being Atman, because that's the point. Because what you are at your core is the same thing as what everything is, and outside of your categorizations and this funny loop of subjectivity, there's only that. There's only potentiality, unmanifest.
Great breakdown, man.
Yeah,
Oh,
and thou art that, right? That whatever you are perceiving is at the deeper level the same thing that you are.
So when you said isness, I thought of Muji. Muji, he's had a rocky relationship with this podcast, because most of the time I bring him up, it's to shit on him. But he's really cool. I just stopped listening to him because I just sort of moved on. But he helped me at a certain stage. And one of the things he says is he's big on isness, and he also says that that which is perceived, that the perceiver is perceiving itself in the objects of perception. So that, say that one more time. The perceiver is perceiving themselves in the objects of perception.
Right.
So that's a nice little loop, kind of tying up that Brahman, Atman.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're Atman perceiving Brahman, but that's actually Brahman perceiving Brahman.
Yes.
And Atman is the loop. It's the place where it turns back on itself.
Right on. Yeah. Okay.
And that's Taoism. That is Gnostic Christianity. That's Kabbalistic. Kabbalistic Judaism and Sufi Islam,
I was gonna say,
and
Rumi stuff for sure. Yeah.
It's just like, and they go off in different directions, and so part of what I've been interested in as well is how, if you can start with that assumption, which some people might have an issue with, that they're all trying to say the same thing, how that the ungraspability of that idea. Talking about a thing that's not a thing, that's the source of thingness, talking about something that is truly not something easily conceptualizable. They're all starting there. They all have to use metaphor. They all have to point at the moon.
Yes.
Because we can only talk about the world as we perceive it. And that process of making the metaphor is where they turn into religions. And then it's just iterative. And it's so, I think, so banal as it gets passed on from parent to child. That right there, how are you going to pass down a subtle message about something that is not the thing that you are talking about? The Tao that can be told of.
It's a recipe for disaster.
Right?
Yes.
Especially in like a working family, and like that. That's just not. It is so obvious and inevitable that would change, and that the story would become the thing over time that gets passed on.
Yeah, dude. So I have a real life example of this regularly. So I've been into the non-dual stuff for like 2.5 years now. My kids, so I have 5 kids. People are always surprised.
Wow.
He made a shocked face, guys. Like everybody. 2 are my DNA, and the other 3 are stepkids.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So my son, my stepson, and my oldest daughter go to Catholic school, and my wife is Catholic, and she went to Catholic school, and I'm not, but it's a good school, and the community's great, and
Right.
we're very involved. So they do actually do like Bible homework, and so I'll help them with their Bible homework, and I'll read stuff, and I'll just be like, I'm seeing it in this whole new light I never could have imagined. Like I see the non-duality.
You see the metaphor,
yes.
and the places where it was supposed to be a metaphor.
Yeah, and you see how
it survives.
Yes, and you see how easily it can be misinterpreted and used as So an example was, I think they asked Jesus, what was the most important commandment, and he said something like love God above all others or something like that.
Right.
But I remember reading it and just going like, oh, like he's saying what the Buddha says, like be a light unto yourself. Right. He's saying what like I could just fill in all the other.
You just lose that one thing.
Yeah.
That you are the thing that you're looking
That's
for.
It, exactly.
If you lose that, you end up in a totally different neighborhood.
Yeah.
That's a very important part of it.
It is.
And it's so hard with Western religions, which I spent some time going back on, when I was less angry about it, in the same way, and looking for that message. And you can just tell it's been like covered up so many times that you really, even within academia, they really have to like stretch and speculate at that point to try and say, oh, here's what was really going on, here's what they were really saying, but it seems highly likely.
So that's why I say like somebody like Ramana, somebody like Paul, I'm going to put them in the same. I think Paul is the best at this that I've found. Of no additives, like straight to it, nothing extra, relentless in it. I always use this too, I gotta find a better word, but he's so disciplined in that he won't allow. Always brings it back. He always brings it back to,
because the mind wants that other stuff.
Of course,
give me that thing I can hold on to.
And
not this slippery shit.
Goes, no, you can't hold on to any of it. And oh, when am I gonna get it? You're never gonna get it.
Right.
And see what you're not. That's all. The best technique, the best whatever you got, is to see you're not that.
Right.
You're not going to see what you are. The eyes can't see themselves. And Alan Watts he was another real important one for me. He gets at it too, but he does add a lot of extra stuff in there that's all really clean and really intellectually honest and stuff, but it's just it's too much for my mind to chew on.
Right.
Like Paul just goes straight to it, relentless every single time, and I think it cuts away all the fat that the religions and the other stuff accumulate, with over years and over culture.
I couldn't agree more.
Right.
And I'm glad that we arrived here, because this is what I've been thinking a lot about. You introduced me as someone who's studied this, and I have, though there's huge knowledge gaps. I studied whatever was put in front of me, often on my own, often just reading old books. Aldous Huxley is probably the most modern interpretation of any of this that I've read.
Well,
I've had a really hard time finding.
While I'm thinking about it, we can come back to it. Have you done psychedelics?
I have. Yes.
Okay, so we don't need to get into it now, but that'll be an interesting. I like to.
Yes. And particularly how late. I mean, that's only come about in the last few years.
Right on.
And
so you have a hell of a philosophical scaffolding built up before you dove in. Yeah, right on. I love it.
But that's precisely the thing, and that's what I'm dealing with right now. Is that became old and stagnant a while ago. Studied a lot. Of course, there's more you can read, but at some point they're saying the same thing again and again and again. You can literally go study a completely different tradition. You're like, got it. Same idea, right? There's only one thing, and you're that thing, but you can't see it. Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And
you need.
It's not even a complicated concept.
No, that's why the Zen bitch slap is such a great way of saying it.
Right.
Because someone comes along and it's not gonna lull you into the same. It's like, Here's your whack. Like,
I love it. And here will be my academic reference, but skillful means. That's called skillful means in Zen Buddhism. And
it's so funny
there's
you
a
said
reason
that.
for it.
It's because Paul always talks about how this isn't a skillful means.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Because he says he wants to be helpful in. I disagree with him on that. He wants to be helpful in AA.
Yeah.
He wants to help people to recover. He doesn't want to be helpful in non-duality. So he says it's not a skillful means. But I've come up to him and I've been like, Paul, when I am in existential crisis, when I'm in anxiety, when I feel like the walls are closing in, I put on your talks, and it's the only thing that can bring relief.
Right.
That seems like a fucking skillful means to me. He goes, you know what? It is. But if I say it, people are going to take it the wrong way.
Right. Well, it puts you in because it even has baggage. Even as an Eastern concept, it has baggage that puts him in the position of being a Zen master or something.
Yeah, he doesn't want to be that.
Right.
Yeah. I called him my guru once. And
it has a lot of legitimacy when people don't want that, But,
okay.
So I enjoy it, but yeah. So it's grown stagnant. It didn't. I have all this scaffolding.
Yes, I love
scaffolding. The scaffolding even contains the seeds of its own undoing.
Yeah.
In that I've read enough to know the Tao that can be told of is not the eternal Tao. Brahman is not that which the ear hears. It is that by which the ear hears. That's from the Upanishads.
Yeah.
That's
Beautiful.
what I loved about it. So explicit. It's not that, right?
Yeah.
It's something that
It's
we
not-
can't talk
it's not
about.
gonna be in the
We're
next
going to
book.
talk about how we can't talk about it.
Yep.
So I even know that. But even knowing that doesn't, it can open me up to hearing a new message. Right? It can open me up to saying, this hasn't worked, and what I've learned told me it wasn't going to lead me anywhere. That direct experience is the only way. That it's right here if you can only let go and see it.
And in that weird way, it's your own interest, which is the biggest. Paul says all the time, the biggest deterrent, the biggest, the biggest problem is your own interest in it.
Right.
And as soon as Nick's interest dies down, you can be open to new things. Right. There's an availability to new things.
Very relevant.
Yeah, right on. And so,
that's what's going on, because I know all this stuff. I never gave up on it, but where did it take me? Eventually I just have to get a job and plan the rest of my life. And reading another book about it, listening to another Alan Watts lecture. By the way, I love him too. I think I've listened to every audio
thousands of
tape.
hours.
It just hasn't done anything, and so that's made Paul's message really appealing. The other thing I was going to say is this is just my own personal academic nerdiness on this subject, but I was both interested in non-dualism, specific philosophies that I thought were very clear about it, like Taoism and Upanishadic Hinduism, and have gone on long tangents studying Buddhism, trying to develop a regular meditation practice, often failing.
Oh, really? I've never experienced
and seeing
that.
a lot of value there, and also never seeing those two traditions as incompatible. It makes perfect sense to me. And this is what I would love to if your listeners have, because you get in trouble for saying this in an academic setting for ever trying to pick and choose from different philosophies in general.
Really?
But I had a specific office hours debate with one of my professors, one of the main people who taught me about both Upanishadic Hinduism and Buddhism. And I was saying, isn't Buddhism the exact method that you would, because if you read the Upanishads, they talk about realizing that you're that, and that benefiting you in rebirth and in your life, right? But they don't get very specific. There's still a lot of religion mixed in there in terms of what you're supposed to do about it. And then Buddhism comes along in this period, in this place.
Well,
and the Buddha says,
the Buddha was Hindu.
I don't give a shit. I'm not going to talk about any of that. Do this. None of that matters.
Yes.
Here's what you do, and thinking about that and reading about that is just going to be a barrier to you. And to me, I was like, well, aha, the Buddha wasn't saying here's a new thing. He was saying maybe so, but those are all ideas. They're not going to get you there.
Yes.
Here's a way to get there.
Yeah.
And so I've always seen those as two sides of the same coin. An interesting but possibly unhelpful side, and a method that, as part of the method, says don't. Who cares about the other side?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's
right
the
on.
conceptual side, and so
I
to
would
tie
love
this
to
all
be
back
a fly
together.
on the wall when you were having this debate with him. Okay.
She was completely.
Oh my God.
She was so virulent. And
she
like,
had her
you
mind
cannot
made
combine these things. They're
What's
disrespectful,
so funny
and they're
about
different philosophies.
What's so funny about it is the Buddha was Hindu. He was born into that culture.
Right.
And then, as you know, some people draw the analogy of Jesus was born Jewish and then reformed Judaism for a new age, and Buddha was born Hindu and reformed Hinduism for a new age.
It's like both of them are saying you missed the point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Let's make this clear for you. It's not about the story.
Yeah.
Bring it back.
Bring it back to here.
And then people are like, great, so new story. Okay, got it. Let's talk about the new story.
Which we're so good at. Yeah.
To tie it all together, I feel like I'm having, that discovering you guys and listening to Paul and think revisiting these ideas is kind of revisiting that same thing that I've discovered before.
It's
that
like
it's
another,
you get caught up on the other side. You're following ideas that may somehow point at the moon, but they're not going to get you to the moon.
Exactly.
They're not going to get you anywhere.
And then in this weird paradoxical way, like getting to the moon is realizing you can never get to the moon.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And like Paul says, an unspoken yes. Right. It's just something inside hits. Like it's not nihilism. It's all for nothing. It's not some sort of divine plan. It's just like a unspoken yes hits of like, oh, okay, this is, pick your word, truth. This is it. This is, and there's a chilling out. Paul will say there's like a chilling out of the action figure.
Yeah.
It knows it's not going to find what the hell it thought it was going to find, and it's here and it's available for today.
Right.
Yeah. It's been a cool, slow unfolding over here. Yeah. Okay, so for the sake of the podcast, we'll go back into the stories.
I was just thinking about what you're saying. So I'm like spacing out here. I'm like,
It's cool. Yeah. So I gotta check the time. We don't want to be late. We got time. We got hella time. Okay. So I'll go two directions here. So one, we can talk psychedelics, which could be fun.
Okay.
And two, I was gonna say, I consider myself like a skeptic, right? Like I don't. I'm not atheist. I'm not convinced that there is no God, because that's, ideological to me.
I think it's an oversimplification of the question,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Like at this point in my life, I'm like, what are you?
But
Western God? What God are we talking about? Define your terms.
Yes. So I would say I'm skeptical in that I don't really accept things unless I can almost, this isn't the best way of saying it, but almost unless I experience it myself, I don't, right? And that's something that's something we were talking about last week, I think, when I was giving you a ride over here. You said what you liked about the sort of non-dual world was you don't have to believe anything. Yes, which I love too. You don't have to have faith. You don't have to believe. It's just either it's true for you, now, or it's not.
I'd even go further than just true for you, and well said. I feel the same way. I'm a total skeptic, which is kind of funny, or at least I think of myself as a skeptic.
Yeah, I do too.
But it's funny when we get into this area or in a conversation or something. They're like, "Oh, you're a skeptical mystic,"
yeah.
And you're like, "Well, yeah, I guess I am, because I'm very, very black and white structural thinker." When it comes to the world as we live in it, as we perceive it, I'm like, it's probably, science has probably got most of that thing.
Yeah, we can measure.
But what is that thing is a whole different domain.
That's it.
But within that, I'm almost offended, actually, if we're just talking about myself. I'm almost offended by wooey, pseudoscientific, new age stuff,
Unless
it hits directly on these things.
Yes.
I'm like, you are, and this is, I'm not defending this, but I do feel this way. I'm like, you're denigrating the wondrousness of the world as it is by making up a story about what it's not.
That's it, man.
Can you not see it's already the most insane magic that we could possibly experience?
You don't need
and
to
you just keep forgetting about it?
Yeah, you don't have to. Yeah, that's it, man. You just baseline reality is fucking magic.
It's insane.
Just the fact that something is conscious in this moment is magic. You don't need ghosts. You don't need psychics. You don't need energy.
Space and time and color and light and sound and music and I'd love to fly, but like that goes on forever.
You're getting me in a space where I feel like it's psychedelic, and I'm totally sober. But yes, 100%. And this similar thing, I just got to throw this out there. My kids will talk about like, man, wouldn't it be so cool if dragons were real or unicorns were real? I was like,
horses are real.
Yeah, I'll be like, dude, have you seen an octopus? Right. That thing is so much crazier than any mythical creature. You know, it has real-time camouflage, even though it can't see color.
Yeah.
Like it can squeeze through these little holes. It's like that thing. It's insane. That's so much cooler than any mystical creature. Right. So,
and if the mystical creature existed, you'd be like, big fucking deal,
yeah, you'd be
right?
Like rhinoceroses are real. What the hell?
Kurt Vonnegut talks about that. He says that like what human beings are better at than anything else is getting used to things. I'm misquoting that, I'm sure, but like
adaptation.
As soon as like you could think of the most wild thing in the world, there is nothing you can't get used to, good or bad. There's nothing that the mind will not say, level set, this is normal now. I'm not amazed.
We live in a, I know it's I don't know, cliche or whatever, but we live in a magical time where you take your phone and you say, hey Siri, and
it's so boring for people.
It'll answer any question.
If she doesn't get it the first time, people are mad.
Yeah, exactly. In the known universe, like we live it. Like every time I FaceTime, I'm like, we're living in the future. Like I can see you there in real time,
right?
And we just get used to it. And we just and then
magic could appear on Earth tomorrow, and a year from now, there would just be some wand stores and like some new industries around it.
We'd be looking for the next thing.
So bored.
That's it.
Find a way to judge each other on their magic.
That's it, man. Okay, cool. So I don't know how we got off on that. We're gonna get into psychedelics.
There was psychedelics and there was
the belief in the having to have faith, and then we already have all the evidence we need that this is fucking magic.
So that is very, very interesting to me, and I'm happy to talk about psychedelics too. But that is the approach that I took, because for the reasons that I said, I had been tuned up to say, critical thinking is magic, right? Like, logic, and then if you study logic in a more formal setting, it's really even more powerful than people think. We all use logic in our day-to-day lives, but if you
break it down,
it can be honed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was drunk on that, I can
drunk
break
on
down everything.
And you feel invincible. Give me an idea, I'll break it down logically,
And so non-dualism, and again, this might not be helpful in any way, but non-dualism was the axiom that every other, I'm breaking stuff down, I'm thinking about the nature of reality, I'm thinking about religion, I'm thinking about isness and whatever, and I felt like I kept coming back to a self-consistent principle that this concept, helpful or unhelpful, was well supported deductively, using totally Western logical means, that it just added up, and I could go on and on about this, and I won't, but
I actually
you can come
completely.
up with all these different angles that are totally non-mystical, non-magical, and possibly non-helpful.
It's the same point. You can use physics, you can use Einstein, you can use quantum mechanics.
Just take one example, logic itself. As I studied, they're talking about where there's like 12 14, depending on which set you use, traditional logical rules, modus ponens, modus tollens, hypothetical, syllogism. They're just...
I'm out of my depths, but I'm with you. I like it.
You would recognize all of them in practice.
Okay, yeah.
Modus ponens is just if A, then B. A.
Yeah.
B. Right? If A, then B, you have A, therefore B.
Gotcha.
Right? The rule is set up, and then the following out of that rule. We use that all day, every day. Modus tollens is slightly more complicated. If A, then B, not B, therefore not A, which is more similar to negative theology.
Okay, I like it. Yeah, I like it.
Hypothetical syllogism is if A, then B, if B, then C, A, therefore C. So now you've made a transitive leap. They're very simple.
I'm an electrician. I do logic gates. They're all logic gates.
Yes,
right on.
they are.
Cool. Okay.
And there are some funny ones. Those are probably the three simplest.
Yeah.
And
they get more complicated.
They're very... they're not very common in making a point as you go down the list, but they are valid. They're self-consistent.
Got it. It's a complete circuit. It's a closed loop.
Yeah. They all work, and you could create word arguments with even the most complex ones. They just wouldn't be that useful in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
But those logical rules come from a few different places, but one of the people who helped develop them was Leibniz, who also was a co-inventor of calculus. And Leibniz kind of wrote a lot of these down and was like, these are basic rules of logic that are built into the world, if you want. And he showed that they were all reducible, that they could be, all the rules could be derived from simpler rules, and all the simplest rules could be derived from one rule. The one rule you need is the law of identity. Something is itself. A is A. Said another way, if A, then A, therefore A.
Okay, that's very non-dual.
So simple. But you can't have logic if something is not itself. Right?
You gotta start somewhere.
You gotta start with this. And to me, that was one more thing pointing at, okay, so isness, including something is what it is and it's not something else, is at the core. He didn't just say you need this. It's not just everything can be derived directly out of this, right? A being A, something is what it is. The whole of logic comes out of that. Logic applied to quantity, you have arithmetic, and at further iterations, calculus, and at further iterations with physicality, you have physics, right?
Yes.
You can come at it from physics.
But if you follow it all back, it all starts at A is A.
Right, and if you wanted to break that down further, just is, right?
And then you want to break that further, silence.
Exactly. That's not the only way to come at it. And then you come at it from the anthropological angle that Aldous Huxley talks about. Like, this idea also pops up in all these cultures. Why? Totally independent.
Exactly.
Why is that?
Why are we all driven towards the same conclusion?
Right. You can come at it internally, right? The mystic path. You can come at it through psychedelics. And what is amazing is you just keep coming back to the same slippery idea.
And so with psychedelics, I would say it what's his name, Terence McKenna would talk about, like, you can meditate in a cave for 10 years and maybe get to that place consciously, or you can take 5 dry grams of mushrooms and it will put you there whether you want to be there or not, right? I've never taken 5 dry grams, but when you're talking, I was thinking of the last time I did MDMA. I was talking with somebody, and it was, again, now words, this is taking one dimension, language, to try to explain the 10 dimensions of a psychedelic realization. So last time I was doing MDMA and I was talking to someone and looking in their eyes, I was going, oh, like, I'm that over there.
You could almost feel it.
You can, like, the veil of the idea of me here, you there, was completely lifted, and there was absolutely no difference. Like, it's just me over there, shaking their head and talking, and me over here, and I'm simultaneously hearing my voice as I'm speaking it, where the hell are these words coming from? I didn't write this script ahead of time and then deliver it. It's
Right.
just, and so that was one example. That was one of the lighter ones. Some of the mushroom ones are so it's so hard
Right.
to use language to talk about it, because
that was the revelation.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
like out of language.
Yeah,
for a minute.
exactly.
You're like-
And MDMA just shifts it enough that you can still kind of I could still use the English language to convey that it was like I was utterly convinced that I am you. I want good for you just as much as I want it for me. I'm not at all concerned of that background of like, oh man, is he thinking that I'm weird? Is he not accepting me?
Right.
All that melts away.
It's pretty nice.
Yeah, it's freedom,
Right.
and time disappears, and all sense of place disappears, and so I'll kick it off with that. Now let's hear about some of your experiences.
Well, I mean that. I have never. I have tried that, and
MDMA?
yeah,
Yeah.
and felt very, very good. I have never fully gotten there. I think I still. We started this conversation me saying how afraid I was back in the day.
Yeah.
I still worry about losing control, and
Of
that
course.
definitely psychedelics are a newer thing in the last few years for me, and I still get nervous.
Yes.
So I've never
As
done.
you should, man, and you should respect them. And
Right.
yeah, no, 100%. We are way too.
But they've been
relaxed.
they've been positive.
Yeah.
I will
Right
say
on.
that. Let me speak to the MDMA real quick, because
Yeah.
I was talking to my girlfriend about this, about Paul actually. She came to the meeting on Saturday. She's been thinking about it a lot as well, and it's interesting too, because she doesn't have that structure, by the way. So I get to kind of see it
Yeah.
filtered through someone who's not trying to put it in all these boxes that I am. But we've done that together, and
Oh, dude, I've done MDMA with my wife. It's
it came up in our discussion of Paul's message, the message, because our recent experiences with this have produced a sort of, it's getting stale as well, even though I've never gone that far. I'm probably lucky to have waited until my 30s, right?
Yeah.
But it always seems to be the same kind of thing, and it feels great, but there is this lingering sense at the peak, which might not be the highest peak you can go to, but at the peak when you're feeling like, I am just full of love, and I'm so connected, and the problems that you thought were problems don't seem like problems anymore, and you've got so much empathy for everybody. You feel like you can read their faces and really truly feel for them and whatever. And yet for me, my girlfriend said for her as well, there's something that's not there at the peak that knows that this is affect, that this is emotion, that there is love happening, that there is empathy happening, but you're not fully, you feel somewhat disconnected from it. Maybe it's the knowing that you took something that made you feel this way that does that, but my experience has been, I feel it is super strong, it's overwhelming, but there's some lingering thing.
This is so interesting. Right on.
And going back to when I first started getting into some of this stuff, I'm not even sure I thought of it as related at the time, but during my darkest moments, just feeling very angsty and depressed as teenager, early 20s, right? When you feel like destroyed, hollowed out, the world is horrible, maybe even suicidal, right? Like it's really, really bad. I recognized that same feeling from the MDMA of there's something that's still here that is clean, that's untouched by this. And there is almost a sense of, at the deepest, darkest depths, when you hit rock bottom, am I humoring myself right now? You know, you're kind of like, do I actually feel this, or who is the me that feels this way? Because it only happens for me when you go far enough in one direction.
The
Either
extremes,
the highs of Molly, or
the extremes of the spectrum.
And then the delta, as it were, the difference becomes apparent, that there's something that's not along for that ride.
Yes.
It's still right where it was before, and it's fine.
It's untouched.
It just is.
Yes. Yeah.
So even very recent experiences with MDMA have almost increased my thoughts about this stuff.
That's so cool.
So what is that?
Yeah. What is untouched?
Right.
What doesn't change? That's really awesome. Okay. So man, I had things as you were going, but I didn't want to stop you. It was
sorry.
don't be sorry. That was so cool. Okay. So what hit for me, I felt like I was on MDMA there for a minute when you were talking about it, because you were saying that I would say probably most people's subjective experience when the euphoria hits, when the oneness, the love hits, is we're probably lost in that, right? And when we're lost in it, we're identified with it, and we're identified with that feeling of I'm one with everything. But that still is an attachment to that feeling that's being produced, right, during that experience. And ultimately, as Paul would say, see what you're not. You're not any of the arisings, whether the arisings are extreme euphoria or extreme depression, either end of the spectrum. You're that which is aware of any arising, right? And being able to, like, instead of maybe the lesson that a lot of people come away with after MDMA is, oh, we're all one and this and that, we're going like kind of meta and like another level of like, I'm not even the experiences on that substance. I'm the consciousness
still
that's
prior,
aware of it.
still prior. Whatever you think, prior.
Prior, exactly.
Right.
And another thing that came to me was another comedian I really like, Pete Holmes, my favorite podcaster. His guy was Ram Dass, his guru. And when Ram Dass passed away recently, about a month before he passed away, he went to see him, and he was coming up to him and talking about his latest and greatest, life problems.
Pete Holmes, the comedian?
The comedian, you know Pete Holmes?
Yeah.
Oh, right on. Okay, cool.
I saw that.
He wrote a book, Comedy Sex God. He has the similar fundamentalist.
I watched the show. Crashing or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, he's awesome.
And maybe too
close to home. Same here, man. Way too close to home.
But I did not know that he was interested in this kind of stuff.
Super interesting. Oh, yeah. And I've been listening to him for like 6 years, so I've got to see him go on his journey. When I first started listening, he was atheist, and I saw him. He met Duncan Trussell, the other guy that I mentioned earlier, and he introduced Ram Dass to him, and he opened him up. And now he's like a hardcore, or not hardcore, but he's like a non-dual, super, out there guy. Yeah.
There you go, man.
Yeah. So it's one of the
recovering Catholics.
Yeah. Right. And so, what was I gonna say? Oh, he was talking to Ram Dass about his latest and greatest life drama, and he saw someone else came over and started talking to him about his latest and greatest life drama, and then they walked away, and Ram Dass looked at Pete Holmes and pointed at his head like this and said, "Entertainment." So that came in for me when you were talking about the darkest suicidal, depression, which I've been there, seemingly, Nick's been there, to the euphoria, to the anywhere in between. It's kind of in the end, it's all just entertainment.
Right. It's a tragic movie, but
we love to keep ourselves busy.
Right.
Yeah. I had a little moment of that where I had sat down at a park bench last week, was looking at a tree, sun was shining in the tree, and then I saw the drive of like what's next just died for a second. And I'm like, oh my god, like we're slaves to like what's next.
Oh my gosh. No one's more of a slave to that than me.
We all are, bro. We all are. And I go to Paul's meetings and I love this shit and I'm completely clear what the problem is, and I seemingly fall into the problem again and again and again of what's next. And like as soon as and then interesting talking about fear too, I noticed when I was like, let's just let go of what's next. Right. Let's be here, that fear came up, and it's like an existential.
Your mind's like, no.
Yeah. Like if we
that's not our agreement.
If we relax, the tiger's gonna get us. If we relax, the boogeyman that, has been waiting around every corner your whole life is finally gonna, pounce on you.
Yeah.
And, evidence points to the boogeyman never comes. Whether you're relaxed or not.
Right.
Yeah, and so that was another thing that came up for me. Thank you for sharing that experience, for real.
Yeah.
That's really touching something deep inside of our psyche.
That it's interesting for me because that is, we talked about not the concepts maybe pointing you in a direction that's somehow helpful. I probably never would have come here. We wouldn't be having this conversation.
Yeah.
And for me, that's those moments, and you don't get a lot out of them. It's just like a hint. Are some of the closest that I've had to like the actual experience, the direct mystic experience that is supposed to the good stuff, man. Right? If I read enough Alan Watts, I'm gonna have that direct experience.
Yeah, it's like straight druggy behavior.
But that almost is a direct experience. You say, oh wait, I'm so happy, but is that me that's happy?
Yeah.
For me, I think I've been also weighing, thinking about how I got on this path lately. I've been weighing how much is it these ideas that I got exposed to pushing me in the right direction, possibly the right direction, and how much is there something within me that, for both literally better and worse in my life, can't fully lose myself in the story. I can't. And that's not to put me like. It just feels like things are always resetting for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It feels like I'm always waking up into the moment, which is distracting and I feel like leads to me kind of being different in interactions sometimes, or like the guy who wants to talk about things or whatever. And I wonder sometimes how much of that was already there, that just this inkling, that's like I keep forgetting the plot of the movie, and because of that I'm able to every so often kind of be like, suspension of disbelief is not perfect, and therefore when I'm exposed to those ideas, it's like, okay, well maybe that explains something.
Yeah, and it's another thing Pete Holmes talks about a lot, is that, and so do all sorts of spiritual teachers, that it's in the forgetting that is the dualism of this reality. It's like you forget to remember, because if you didn't forget, you could never remember.
Right.
And that's the swing of what we're in here, and then you eventually get to the place that you realize actually you've never not been it. You've never not been awake. Like, even when you're lost in the past, that's something Paul says, which is so beautiful. I can't believe other teachers don't talk about this. You can't get out of the moment.
Right.
Like, people talk about, I'm going to get in the moment. Like, you can't get out.
Right.
You can be in the moment entertaining all sorts of fantasies about the past and future, but you're in the moment entertaining those things. Right? And so instead of a concentrated effort, as he says, you can't use activity to produce stillness. That would be activity, right? Instead of forcing yourself into the moment, it's funny, he said one time, it's like trying to fit two into one, right? Like me plus the moment into one thing.
Right.
But once you realize you can't be out of it, you're here. It's unavoidable. There's no, there's no getting around it. So when you realize you're here, all the extra stuff it's available to fall away, and you find yourself, your little expression is available to express with a lot less baggage and weight. And that's what he always says. You travel lighter. I had a little. I don't want to.
Well said.
Yeah, right. I don't want to make this about me. I'll make it very brief. But I was coaching a volleyball thing over the weekend, and my wife wasn't there. She's the head coach. I'm the assistant coach. And one of the kids dislocated his knee. and he's a 17-year-old. His knee, it looked gnarly. It looked like something out of a movie. Like his cap was on the side of his leg. It was rough. And I came up to him, and he was being tough, but he was freaking out. And I'm like, everything's gonna be okay, man. He's like, it's not gonna be okay. And I, called 911. I need an ambulance to here. I gave him the address. I was there with him. They came in. We got him all situated. We got him in the hospital. I got in my car. I followed him to the hospital. I followed him in. They relocated his knee. Like, this is a story. I can only tell a story, but there was no sense of self. The mission was take care of him.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And,
I know exactly what you mean.
And as soon as he was good, this was the really cool thing of you notice something by its absence. As soon as he was good and he was off the pain meds and his knee was back in place, I saw the sense of self kick back in. Like the engine
like,
started.
Okay,
you
handle the situation. Time for
it was so
regularly scheduled programming.
Back to our the golden oldies. Paul calls it the golden oldies. I'm worthless. I'm unlovable. All this shit kicks back in.
Right.
But because I'm gonna attribute it to these meetings and Paul. That's the if you want to isolate for variables, the fact that I was just available. Nick, the action figure, was available, and just like I called 911, and then 15 minutes later, they're about to come up, and one of the parents goes, "Did anyone call 911?" Like no one else thought of it,
Right.
And it was the thing that came into my head was the next right thing.
Right.
Which I've heard in some non-dual things or maybe Buddhist things. It's not the next 100 right things, but what's the next right step to take.
Right.
Yeah, and so that was just a little real life, sober experience of like, where the rubber hits the road. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. I'm not gonna say I live for those experiences, but it's weird the difference between Action Patrick and nothing all that important is happening Patrick, because the latter is not very capable in a lot of things, Action Patrick, when I don't get in the way of myself, and when the stakes are high enough and I get out of the way, it's fluid. I'm boom, 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 boom.
You're in like a flow state.
Exactly. Flow state. There's a whole study of it now.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't say this earlier, but I actually ended up getting my master's in education.
Oh, right on.
I didn't become a teacher, but they talk a lot about, there's a whole area of study now around flow states and how to bring it about and whatever.
In education?
In education, yeah.
That's awesome.
Because you want to get kids into that flow state with learning, right? When you find out about a new thing, or you're taking up a new activity or whatever, and the level of difficulty is just high enough, and the level of interest is just high enough, you lose yourself in it.
That's it.
Mastery comes much faster.
Mm-hmm.
Your skills progress much faster, and
and
what we're talking about, it makes perfect sense, right? You were just busy enough on that one thing to get yourself out of the way, and things went so much smoother once you did that.
So to go meta, one of the reasons I like doing this podcast is I feel like it puts me in a flow state, because I like to use, I've used it before, the electrical metaphor of, without someone to talk to, it's like a hot wire with no neutral. There's no ground, there's no complete circuit. And when you get with somebody such as yourself, you fire each other up, you can get into this kind of state. I call it like verbal jazz.
Right.
It's like a duet. It's like a call and response.
You're building ideas together.
Yeah.
And you got some extra inputs.
Exactly.
You don't just have the toys in your sandbox.
That's it. And
I have some other Legos for you. You're like, oh yeah, I was trying to build that.
And then the sum is better than the sum is better than the total's better than the sum, whatever.
The sum
is better than the total of its parts.
Yeah,
that sounds
like
right.
That.
So there's a third cooler note being hit by these two little notes trading back and forward, and that's that flow state is like it's like a drug in itself.
Well, and people love it. This is why people
rock climb,
play sports, right? Like it's snowboarding for me. I can totally get into a flow state.
I'm so happy when I hear that people have a thing,
right?
That they could get them.
I think a lot of people do, because the first time they experience it, they're like, I'm a rock climber now, right? Because I got that, and what they're getting is a little taste of what you can get from psychedelics, is a little taste of what you can get from meditation, is a little taste. It is a little break from the often toxic and
like
completely engrossing
Yes.
movie
Yeah.
that causes all your consternation. It's like, give yourself a little bit of distance,
Yeah.
even if
Doesn't-
it's just because you were so focused on something.
Yeah.
That,
Doesn't take
and
much.
people are like,
Yeah.
it explains, people are now seeing the benefits from MDMA, from ketamine, from whatever in a clinical setting.
Yep.
And you're like, you
from
gave people who were
PTSD.
stuck in a really bad loop,
Yep.
you just gave them a minute
Yeah.
to like reset, shake it off.
Mm-hmm.
And now they come back and they're like, oh, they're not at least spinning as fast, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's seen for once. Instead of that electrical circulating current, it widens it out. It gives it a little bit more space. That's weed for me too. It's like I'm so caught up in some huge problem at work, and I take like a puff of my vape, and I'm like,
and it just short
why
circuits the circuit.
Why the hell did I care about that?
Right.
And I was utterly convinced that it was the end of the world. And in a moment, it doesn't always take a substance. Sometimes it's just seeing my baby smile. Sometimes it's nothing. Sometimes it's just a fucking, a gift or whatever, just a little free sample.
Break it for a second.
But that circulating current in the mind is so insidious, and the Paul talks about the self-centeredness, and it doesn't translate well to the podcast, but he talks about like it's all here. It's all got my hands around my head.
Right.
It's all you're
Yeah,
total.
he's talking about body at the last talk that we went to.
Yeah.
We imagine a body, which is really just the locus of
all the focus, all the interest and attention is condensed into this one thing,
Right.
and it's going to be fucking painful. It's too much wattage for this light bulb. You gotta let it out. You gotta let it shine. You gotta disperse it. And you don't have to, but if you do, you'll get a whole lot of freedom. You get a whole lot of traveling lighter. Some good metaphors, right?
It's
I can't take
really
credit for
good.
any of them.
I'm using some of your Lego blocks right now,
Right on.
pretty
I like
quickly.
it. Yeah.
It's making me think of a few minutes ago we were talking about how it's entertainment.
Yeah.
You create problems for yourself or whatever. It's so evident to see you think you want all of these things, whatever, and if you have any experience with extremely wealthy people, which for various random reasons, like you get to peer into that world or spend time with someone and you realize they have as many problems that they feel just as deeply, if not more deeply, because they're self-created.
Yeah, and they have all the things that you're convinced if you had them, all your problems would disappear.
Right,
Yes.
right. And it almost is like once you solve all those problems, now your brain has to come up with new problems, and it's going to come up with really sticky personal issues and neuroses and stuff instead, because it doesn't have anything out here to like go do.
Yes.
It's like, well, I'm just going to start rearranging the decks on the Titanic of my mind instead, and having psychological problems or whatever because I don't have anywhere to send this energy.
That interest and attention, that energy. And that's why Paul always says it's an AA thing, which I really love, is being of service.
Yeah.
Like and being of service, there's a million ways to be of service. You can be, you're available if the kid dislocates his knee. You're available to cook a meal for a friend or a family or a loved one, or to read a book with somebody or talk with somebody, or like you'd be surprised, like people just. So many people
get out of yourself a little bit.
Because everyone else is in themselves, and you can provide a little bit of hey, you're not alone to somebody else.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's like so simple, but it's such a gift. Instead of just being stuck in here, like I love rearranging the furniture on the Titanic and sink it. So you really believe that.
Well, and that must, and I'm kind of thinking of this just based on what you said as we go, but you're also, when you don't have something external to focus those energies on, and you start rearranging the Titanic, you're also building the Titanic. You are reinforcing it by going and using those energies to be like, well, wait, what do I really want? What am I really doing? Who should I be? Where should I go? The commonality in every single one of those questions is you.
Exactly.
So you're just reinforcing the problem.
You're the problem, and you're finding a million different problems, small stuff, that's reinforcing the same thing. It's the drive to get out of the moment.
Right.
It's the drive to not be here. It's the drive, self trying to get out of self. And there's a million different ways that it tries to do that, but there's really just one undeniable answer that you can't get out of an imaginary place. You can imagine up a million different places, you can't get out of them.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's kind of the wisdom of no escape. That's kind of a Buddhist-y term, maybe more of a Western Buddhist-y term, is that I love it. I had heard that before, and I liked it, but I took it as like, there's no escape from this life, and you're kind of stuck, and you're in prison, and just accept it. But Paul put a whole new spin on it of like, there's no escape because like you're not bound.
Right.
The prison is imaginary, so you don't have to escape because you're not. It's only ever an idea. It's only ever a thought that you're stuck. You're
Right.
not. Check in this moment. You're here. This conscious awareness. You know.
You're fine.
You're fine.
There's something underneath that's fine. If
Yeah.
you're not fine.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other, I don't know if you said it at the talk, but one of my favorite, I got it written in my truck. I put it, read it every morning. Upon having never left.
I know. I really love that.
Right?
I listened to your
right on.
recording with
Yeah.
Paul,
Okay.
by
Cool.
the
Cool.
way.
Cool. Yeah.
I think that's so.
Yeah.
It's
like,
so wonderful.
It's like what could you say to your kids? Not like everything's gonna be okay, because that implies the future. You can say everything is okay, and you know that has some baggage to it. But if you're like, upon having never left, there's nothing you can do to have damned yourself. There's nothing you could do to have left. You're here. You're home. You've always been home, no matter how convinced you weren't.
Right.
And fucking relax and enjoy.
Seriously. This is just one more tangent.
Please. I gotta
but-
check the time. We got.
Oh, should we go?
Oh,
we should go.
You want to finish the tangent?
All I was gonna say was going to the effects that the other thing that I think we all have experience with never having heard the message or looked into any of this. But something I've been thinking a lot about is, you know, when for whatever reason life circumstances bring you to a place where suddenly you're open for whatever reason, like something's crumbled, you hit rock bottom, and now you're kind of bouncing, whatever it is, and you start you just opened up just a little bit. You start saying yes to things, and how powerful that, like, in one night. I was thinking about this just recently, like my groups of friends. I don't have a lot of friends here in San Francisco. They're mostly still back in Colorado, or they moved other places, but I love them so much, and I thought about how I met them, and almost every single one of them I met in a moment of openness. And it only takes, you're like open for 5 minutes, and suddenly you met the love of your life. You're open for 5 minutes,
You're giving me
and
chills.
you meet an entire group of friends. The world, I mean, is really uncanny. I told you, I don't believe in magic the way, you know, like it's some new age sort of magic, but that's the closest thing I know. You say yes, and the world is just like, finally, all right, here we go. We're gonna give you everything, right? We were just waiting for you to say yes. It's so uncanny, and so, you know, my greatest. I would not say that's something that I'm even a intermediate at, but it is so
like
obvious to me that
you just gotta open up just once.
Right.
Yeah. And I know it's a loaded term, but I do really like grace. It's grace.
I thought about that at Paul's last talk, and it's a loaded term for me especially. But when he was talking about, you're not even the person that's going to find this. Like, I'm talking to you right now, and it may or may not land, but it won't land because the action figure got it. Like, I thought about that. I was like, oh, that's grace.
It is grace.
That's the same thing. It's like it either happens or it doesn't, but it's not because you went out and got it.
Got nothing to do with it either way. You have nothing to do with getting it or not getting it. You can't get it.
And I'm not sure that while I recognized that conceptual connection, that's the most meaningful, the grace, the most relevant it's ever been to my experience.
I agree. Dude, that was awesome. Oh my god. Okay, so I'm
I
gonna
love
say, this is a quote I'll say sometimes: is the best conversations are unfinished.
Yeah.
Because we're just getting started.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got.
These don't end for me.
Right on.
Where are you gonna get to?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the world.
We have come to the conclusion that I love it, dude. So if you're willing to do this again, I'm willing to do this again.
Both of us experienced spontaneous enlightenment, and now we're just sitting at the table silently, and it records for another 3 hours until the
3
battery
hours.
runs out, and you're like, whatever happened to those guys?
If there is going to be ever a conclusion, that would be the
I
conclusion.
heard they're still sitting at that table.
Robbing us out, the bugs coming.
Exactly.
Right on, bro. That was amazing.
Yeah.
We'll do it again
Thank you.
sometime.
It was
Thank
great
you
for
so
me,
much.
too.
Right on.